Warning. This show contains adult political themes and language. Liberals and little children should cover their ears.
Welcome to Liberty Never Sleeps, where negativity never sounded so good. Now here's your host, Thomas Purcell.
Good morning. Welcome to Liberty Never Sleeps. You can contact the show on Twitter at Lotus Tom, by email at tom@libertyneversleeps.com, on Facebook at Liberty Never Sleeps on Facebook.com, or you can watch the show record at Liberty Never Sleeps on YouTube.com. End of the week. Little mini show here for you. You know, one of the things I've discovered, now that we're doing lights and a little bit more with the camera work on YouTube, I understand why so many DJs, I hate that word DJs, so many hosts wear sunglasses while they're doing the show. Because the glare from lights, when you do these shows on YouTube and stuff, you have to light them properly, and there's a lot of glare because you have to use overhead lights. There's about 10, 15 light bulbs above my head and that kind of thing. I mean, you could do it with a camera exposure, but then what happens is it looks like it's a home video. It doesn't look like a studio. You're not properly lit. See, when you're looking at the camera, you can see everything in the room because everything's equally lit. But in order to do that, you have to have a lot of lights. And that's what we do here. But the glare is pretty ferocious. And I wear a baseball cap. Sometimes I wear other hats in order to cut down the glare. But I really got to consider getting some sort of sunglasses, right? Something really cool. That's what a lot of these DJs wear. They wear a lot. Now I understand. I remember when I was a kid, I used to watch Howard Stern. I shouldn't say a kid. I grew up with his show. And I would watch it sometimes. And then when YouTube became available, I watched his TV show and whatnot. But he always had dark glasses. Now I understand why. Because it looks dumb wearing a baseball hat doing these kind of shows. We're discussing politics or something like that. At least I think in my mind anyway. So I got to get some sort of sunglasses this weekend and get rid of the hat and start wearing glasses because this glare is ferocious. Even with the baseball hat, you get so much glare from the screens and so much glare from the lights and whatnot that reflect. Anyway, let's get to today's subject. Yesterday we started to get into it, and I had to edit it out of the show because we didn't have enough time to discuss it. One of the big things that came out of yesterday's debates between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and what's going on in social media and what the discussions are that stop whining, stop complaining, and stop bringing up the subject of voter fraud. Because they say when you discuss voter fraud and you put the question of the legitimacy of American elections in question, that's dangerous. It's dangerous to talk about that. Because if people don't have faith in the election process, they no longer have faith in the law, and they no longer have faith in authority. And they said that's a bad thing. What happened to the 60s generation? What happened to the liberal narrative of always challenge authority? They're out there telling us that it's dangerous to talk about questioning the election. Yeah, it's dangerous. If the people begin to doubt the legitimacy of their legal system, of their election system, then what happens? Well, eventually, if it gets bad enough, if the people become so disenchanted, they don't stop voting. That's what Barack Obama is telling us. Well, it's voter suppression. People stop voting, and if they think that their vote doesn't count. No, they do something a little bit more serious, Barack. They begin to get angry. And if they get angry enough, if they start picking up the pitchforks and torches, you know what that means. People like you end up getting dragged through the streets by their heels. I'm not saying that's what we should do, by the way. But that's what eventually it comes to. If you get enough leaders in a row and things get bad enough, like they're getting down in Venezuela, like they're getting in many other nations, like it eventually got to in Libya, where Muammar Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi used to say, had free elections. They had, believe it or not, Libya was a democracy. Not in the sense that we have it. But many of these nations, the bulk of the world's countries, are run by democracy. to have elections. Why do you think that is? Well, because popular vote can be manipulated in a lot of different ways. It's very easy to manipulate people. I shouldn't say easy. It's very popular to manipulate people, to get people to vote a certain way. In North Korea, they have elections. In Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, they had elections. But everyone knew they were a fraud. But people don't stop voting. That just doesn't happen. People still go to the vote. They get so angry that eventually they throw out their leadership and there's a revolution. That's what eventually it happens. Now that's what they're not saying. That's why they think it's dangerous. Because they lose authority. They lose control. The people that are rigging the election or elections end up losing their asses. That's the bottom line. But what has that shown in history? That it's a good thing. That when dictators come to their final end, that when they've lied to the people enough, that the money is run out, that the people are going hungry, people are running around in the streets with nothing to do, and revolutions happen, it's a good thing. That's what happened in the American Revolution. It's not a bad thing. It's a bad thing for people in authority, yeah. It's a bad people for the one who's rigging the elections. It's bad for the people who are denying people the vote. It's not so bad for the people, though, is it? What happened in 1776? American Revolution, right? Why was the revolution happening? Why did the colonies revolt and separate from Mother England? A lot of people don't know this, get the wrong question all the time. Why? People always yell the same thing. If they're even the slightest bit educated, they'll say, taxation without representation. American colonies had representation. What they didn't have was a vote. They were allowed to petition their king. They were allowed to petition for redress. They didn't have a lot of rights because the king, government, had denied it to them. They said, well, you're not really English citizens. You're Englishmen, you're subjects, but you don't have the same, you don't have representation in Parliament. But you have a process. You must respect the process. And when the people began to disrespect the process, which may have been very limited, but it existed in 1776, they began to do things like throw the tea overboard and get rid of the king. That ultimately was the upshot of it. And it was a good thing. It was the founding of the American Constitution. But what did the colonists do when they finally broke off from England? They established a constitution which said that everybody has a vote. And don't give me that line about, well, these whole blacks, they had 2/3 of a vote. That was done to prevent slave owners from what? Manipulating the slaves into voting a certain way. It was designed to protect the vote, the integrity of an honest election. We've now gotten to the point where strong evidence, direct evidence, videotape, testimony, has shown that our elections are being defrauded. We don't know the extent of it. We don't know whether it's affecting major issues. My attitude is, if there's any election fraud at all, it's a fraudulent election. There should be none. And I mean one vote. If anything's wrong with that system, then something needs to be done. Now, let's put this in relative context. If you think that there's only a very small amount of voter fraud, you don't tolerate it. You just say, okay, we're not going to invalidate the election because it really didn't make that much difference. But we're going to examine the system. We're going to investigate it. We're going to stop this from happening going forward. Liberals used to be big on this. It's what the 60s generation and hippies were all about, weren't they? Question authority. Question what's going on. Question the vote. It's what happened in the Bush-Gore election. Gore came out in a very close election, which no one denies. Some would argue that the popular vote went a different way. It was that close, depending on your interpretation of it. But our founding fathers in their wisdom established something called the Electoral College. so that a couple of votes either way are not going to swing something as major as a U.S. president. It'll also count for regions. So they divide the country into region states. That's really what it is, regions. And they established that there would be electors picked, and the voters, the individual voters, would elect these electors that would go to Washington and decide and meet and pick a president based on population counts in their state. It's a pretty smart decision. It prevents something like the Bush-Gore situation from getting out of control. And it's not the first time either. There have been times when the popular vote went one way and the Electoral College went the other. I think there's been 2 or 3 times it's happened in U.S. history. And every time, it's challenged. As it should be. That's what our court system is for. That's what our systems are set up for. And the Bush-Gore election went to the Supreme Court. Gore sued. Bush was the appellate. And they began to examine the vote. And what was the evidence? The hanging chad, if you remember. There was physical evidence of what the actual vote count was. And Gore accused the state of Florida of altering and suppressing black voters in order to alter the outcome of a presidential election. That's what the case was all about. The case wasn't about the actual vote count. The case was about the suppression of black votes. They were questioning the legitimacy of the authority doing the counting. They were questioning the legitimacy of a number of issues. I remember when Jesse Jackson met with Al Gore. There was all kinds of questions. This went on and on. I remember the outcry. Social media existed in 2000. Everybody was screaming about it. Everybody was talking about it in the media. And for years, even after 9/11 and whatnot, and people still to this day, there were documentaries done about the legitimacy of the 2000 election. It's not a bad thing. It's healthy. What is more damaging to democracy? The very people who are doing potentially election fraud or election rigging, or the people that question it? With this election, there are videotapes showing high-level Democrat operatives manipulating elections and how they did it. It shows them and having evidence of how it's done. They would buy cars in one state, give them to people. The people would then drive across the border and vote, and then drive back and vote. Because they said, oh, you can't really do buses because that's been those kind of things they look for. Guys talking about it like nonchalant over drinks. Like we do this all the time. I've been doing it for years. Commonplace, easy. It's no big deal. They have other films of people who are undercover with cameras. This is what journalism should be doing, folks. This is what 60 Minutes used to do. And now mom and pop bloggers, Project Veritas in this case, James O'Keefe. God bless people like that. Showing how it's done. In one case, one of his undercover people actually makes a suggestion that says, you know, it would be really cool, which would make Donald Trump look bad, is let's beat up a woman in front of Donald Trump. Everybody laugh about it. Ha ha ha. You know, right behind him. Let's get a woman beaten up. And then it'll look like Donald Trump's people are beating up women. Wouldn't that be great? And the guy goes, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. He talks to the other guy on the other camera and goes, oh, let's do this. Well, she goes, well, how would we do something like that? And he goes, well, they'll have to get down there early, like 7-8 hours early, so they're guaranteed a spot. So we get our boys planted in the audience. This is on videotape. It's on my Facebook. It's irrefutable evidence of election tampering. It is absolutely correct to question whether this presidential campaign will be legitimate or not. It is healthy for a democracy to question its leadership. It is healthy for a society to question authority all the time. It's the purpose of the Fourth Estate. It's the purpose of journalism. It's what is enshrined in our Constitution, the freedom of the press. It was designed to act as a check and balance to government. In the United States Constitution stands for a limited government. It does so through a system of checks and balances, and one of which is the Fourth Estate. Journalism, the free press. Investigate everything. Ask questions. Question authority. When I went to school years ago, in the 13th century, we were trained to question authority. At the time, it was considered a hippie, a liberal thing. I went to a liberal university, still liberal. What happened to liberalism? What happened to the hippie movement? Question authority. Election is fraud. That was considered counterculture. Now they're the ones who are in charge. Now all of a sudden we're not supposed to question authority. Now all of a sudden it's dangerous talk. Good. Should be dangerous. The government should be in fear of the people. That's a good thing. The people should be armed all the time. Be on guard for those people who want to tell you what to do and how do you live your life. Question it. And they should always be on guard of the people, to live in fear of them. What is it that we've always were taught growing up? That a government should be in fear of the people, not the other way around. They're not in fear of us anymore. In fact, they're telling us any talk of that is dangerous. That's good. That's a good thing. He talks of it like it's a bad thing. Because why? He's in charge. His people were doing the fraud. His people got caught. Question authority. Be part of the solution. Don't be part of the problem. That's the message for today. I'm not saying that this election is fraud. I'm not saying that the presidential election is rigged, that you shouldn't vote. Very, very much so. That's evidence that the vote itself is honest. In other words, you putting your vote in a ballot box is honest. Once it gets to that ballot, it tells me, in most cases, we haven't seen any additional films. I hear more films are coming out. But once the vote gets to the box, that's honest. What they're trying to do is stuff the ballot box with illegitimate votes. Be on guard for it. When you turn in your ballot, now, make sure if you're using an electronic machine that it's honest. You can ask for a physical ballot. Do it. You can vote early. You could go to your city halls in most states. I'm going to mine today. And turn in your ballot, your absentee ballot, directly to the city hall. Directly to your voting station. They exist. They're open now. Go on Google and Google it and check it out. I'm doing mine today. Mine and my significant others. She and I are filling them out together. Then we put them in the envelopes and take them down to City Hall and go, here is our vote. Count it. Don't trust it to the mailman. We've seen stories where the mailman is just throwing them out in Republican districts. Why is it always Republican thing? You don't see too many times when a postman's throwing out Democrat ballots, do you? You don't see it happening down in Philadelphia or Los Angeles or New York, do you? You see it out in the rural areas. That's a red flag, too. Vote. Nobody's trying to suppress the vote. We're trying to validate the vote. Investigation should go into this. Whether or not Trump wins, that vote should be counted, should be investigated, and every one of these people needs to be investigated. The two people in the videotapes, the two Democrats, these are campaign people for the Team Clinton machine, have already been fired. You know why? They're burning everything now. They're all talking amongst themselves. Who was on a tape with these people? Who was talking with these? They're launching an internal investigation. You can bet on it. You know, that kind of thing. When people know that they're going to jail, somebody's going to end up getting clipped in this whole thing. Trust me. They've already fired 2 people. Who knows what else is going on behind the scenes that we haven't learned about. More stuff's coming out. Good. And if that means you need to redo the vote, fine, so be it. This is what America is founded upon. A free vote. One man, one vote. Not dead people voting. Not illegal aliens. Not felons who have abrogated their constitutional rights by violating the law and violating the Constitution by saying, I don't believe in the Constitution because I'm just going to shred it and do whatever I want. Those people don't get a vote. They shouldn't get a vote. We're out of time. It bothers me terribly when the people in authority who have been caught rigging an election in these videotapes say to us now, there's no fraud. Don't talk about it. Don't question authority. That's vote suppression. No, it ain't. No, it ain't. That's not voter suppression. Just the opposite. What's voter suppression is telling people, go home, do as you're told, we'll handle things. Fuck you. We're out of time. I want you to think about these words this weekend. I want you to be careful. I want you to get out and vote. I want you to be careful about how you handle your vote. Don't just hand it to the mailman. Don't just assume that you can wait until election day to vote, because you know what's going to happen. They're going to limit it. They're going to not have enough voting stations. They're going to have long lines. They're going to say the machine's broken. Only one machine's broken. Don't wait. Don't trust these bastards. Vote early. Get in line now. Get your absentee ballot. Put it in a box. Hand it to somebody at City Hall. It's the best you can hope for. And don't wait till election day to vote. Start voting now. Because they are going to do something. You can count on it. Vote. It's important. I'll see you on Monday. Take care, folks. Have a good one.